All right, everybody, welcome back. Red 13, and here today I'm going to make a few points about the incredible Michael Jordan. Recently I had a video that went up, and it's pretty big for my channel. I'm a very small channel. So I've gotten hundreds and hundreds of responses, and it was about Michael Jordan and LeBron James, right? There's no debate. And it was about who the GOAT is. And the point was, I was trying to make in that video that I think some people missed is that you can't really have a debate with it, because if you ever did try to say something positive about James, it always seems like he's attacked. Off the court, a lot of people don't like him. He's made plenty of bad decisions, and including initiating putting himself as the GOAT, which was a big mistake. You don't want to do that. But in that video, all I wanted to do was, the main thing was push about how great LeBron is and this era. Not to take anything away from Jordan. And I even said in that video, if I had to say someone was a GOAT, it would be Jordan. If I had to say who was really competing against Jordan, if it comes to being the greatest of all time, I would say Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He matches him in a lot of stats, and he played in a very tough era, much harder era, regardless of the amount of teams there are, than LeBron James is in this day and era, this stage we're at in the NBA. So what I wanted to do is, I have other videos in the process, including one on the channel, where we try to break down what is the greatest team. Jordan himself said, what is the greatest team of all time? It shouldn't be about who's the greatest player, and he's showing his different championship rings. And his team on there, as of right now, the 72-win team, we're in the stage where we're about to break the year 2000 when we get to those teams. I honestly don't see anybody being better than that 72-win championship team, probably in the history of the NBA. But one thing that I have discovered is I started going through the 80s, right? And even the 90s, when his team took off, the Bulls, that, you know, when they won 6 titles in like, what, 8-year span, is Michael Jordan, those years, in the last video I made where I kind of put back and forth with James and Jordan, it was, you know, James had been to 10 finals, right? Half his career in the NBA finals. And I was like, people think that I don't mean that means he's better than Jordan. Like I said, I don't even think he's on the same level as Jordan when it comes to who Jordan is as a player. And Kobe was probably the closest to that we've seen since. James is not at that level. And there's a reason for that I'm going to get to in a second. But with that, I didn't want, people kept saying, oh, mistaking it, that meant that he was better. It just meant that James, half his career has been in the finals. And it seems like even when he loses, people just want to pound on him. While Jordan, you know, he went there 6 times in 15 years. And he's 6 for 6, and 6 championships is better than 4. It's better than 5. I would take 6. I would take Jordan's career over LeBron's right now. But what I did discover is there's a reason, there's something I missed. And a lot of times when I'm going through debates with other people personally, it never comes up. I've never stopped to think about it. It never hit me like a ton of bricks like it did while doing actual research and trying to figure some of these, who is the greatest team? And that subject is the fact that Michael Jordan, he went through some freaking tough damn teams. And it's something that as a kid when I was watching it, I didn't see it. You know, I knew the Lakers and the Celtics and the 76ers and the Rockets and the Detroit Pistons. Probably the Celtics and Pistons were 2 of the biggest. The Atlanta Hawks were good. A lot of those teams were outstanding. And Jordan's coming up. And I used to use that a lot, where I'd say, hey, Jordan's never won without Pippen. He needed Pippen. No, what he needed was some help. Anyone. It could have been another great player. Pippen is so good and overlooked, I think, at times, that people, you know, missed what he was. But Jordan had to, even without him, I mean, he was losing to teams that were just, dang, that was a tough team. And that's a tough era in the 80s when Jordan was coming up. And I think what that did by losing mentally, physically, the pounding he took from the bad boys, I mean, that was so tough that when it finally got time to where for him to rise, his team to come up, he was so battle tested. He was so ready that his team exploded. And at that point in the 90s, it was basically, I think as a teenager in the 90s watching it, I'm just like, you know, there was no debate. When the seasons came up after their first championship and after they went back to back, honestly, when they did their third one and beat Barkley and the Suns, I thought that was the one year of those 6. That was probably the only year where I thought, hey, the Bulls might actually lose here. They might actually fall. Jordan might finally have some real competition. And I've had other people put up good points in our conversations and our topics. And people have said, hey, the best way to stop the Bulls was a good defense. right? You know, the Supersonics, the Utah Jazz, those defensive teams, they are, but to me it was like, no. He already went through some of the toughest defenses in the East. And none better than the Knicks. The Knicks were aggressive. The Knicks were tough. The Knicks knew how to beat the crap out of you, and yet Jordan still prevailed over them. If he can get by them, then even the Magic, when they had Shaq and Nick Anderson and Horace Grant, when he gets by those teams, I felt like the teams in the West were not as good. But another mistake I made was that I felt they were never as good as they really were. You know, you took them for granted. I did. I was like, Karl Malone. I know he never went against David Robinson, but still Robinson was one of the top players at the time. But Karl Malone, Gary Payton, Sean Kemp with them, John Stockton, even Magic Johnson, who did make the comeback. But those players in that era that he beat, Charles Barkley and the Suns, the Portland Trailblazers, they were really, really, really good. And they lost to the Pistons and then ended up losing to the Bulls as well. But that, with Clyde Drexler, that was a really good team. And those are all championship teams, most likely, in any other era. You know, maybe the 80s was tough too, you know, but let's say you take Jordan out, those are all championship teams. Anyone who came out of the East, if you take Jordan off and that Bulls team was still really good, which I've made a point to say in the past, and let's say the Knicks go, you know, maybe they make it. Maybe the Magic, who did make it when Jordan left, and the Rockets beat them. The Rocket team, that was really good. The point is that Jordan was so good. He made the other teams in the 90s, in my opinion, at least from my eyes, look inferior. And I didn't say the teams were bad. It just felt like every year it would be like, other than that Suns year, nah, no one in the West is going to stop the Bulls. If the Bulls make it, if they get by Reggie Miller and the Pacers, those were some great series as well. But it's like, you always felt like whoever came out of the East, when in reality it was basically the Bulls. Michael Jordan was so good and so battle-tested and was forged like, you know, like the swords and those fires you see from Lord of the Rings where they're pounding it out. That was Michael Jordan. He got pounded and he took it. And now he is just like, he's basically almost an NBA god at that stage, to where he could do no wrong. And I didn't see that. I just saw, hey, a great player on a great team. And because from when I was my younger years, I'm experiencing Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul at the end of his career. Then you're seeing Dominique Wilkins. You're seeing David Robinson. You're just seeing these players where Akeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler, that are great players that, hey, maybe, you know, Olajuwon might be better than Jordan as a center, but not, you know, overall. I missed the character, what Jordan turned into from all the tough times and the losses and putting in the work. Right, he put in so much work. He told Scottie Pippen, "Don't go with him when he after he retired the first time, not the second time after their 6 championships." He told Scottie Pippen, "Don't go to play with Barkley because he doesn't put in the work." And that's something as a fan. Then there's no social media. You didn't hear that. You wouldn't hear, "Oh, on Twitter, did you see Charles Barkley? He's loving it up in the sun. He's not putting in the work." While Jordan, 24 hours a day, is thinking, "How do I get better?" That was because Jordan had to go through that. He had to build through that and who he was as a person. So as he does that, and he tells Pippen, and then you start to see these other guys where you're like, man, these are all champions in other years. They just had the misfortune of being born and playing in the generation of the Jordan era. And the only wish I could have had, as I talked about in a previous video, was I wish I could have seen that Rocket team that did beat the Knicks. And then the following year, who did they beat that year? The second year? Oh, the Magic. Remember, the Magic had just beaten Jordan when he made his comeback as number 45. But that was, they beat him pretty easily. I would have loved to see the Bulls before Rodman. Even with Rodman, I think they're going to win. But that Rockets, I think that would have been a great series. Maybe it would win 7. We never know. Can't live in what if. That would have been great to see. But as far as Jordan, once I realized this, once I'm doing the research, right? It wasn't from anyone else's comments. You know, sometimes you just got to find things out for yourself. And people have made, I do have to give respect. There has been so many, and I try to, and I do answer all of them. And I always say, thank you for commenting. Thank you for bringing the knowledge. Some people have brought great stats and great things. And when you see it, you see the numbers, you see the stats, and you go, yeah. One person even said, hey, I didn't put a lot of stats in that last video about Jordan versus James. Because honestly, sometimes stats can be misleading. I could say, hey, Jordan did 30 points, had this many assists. Look at this season. Yeah, but that's misleading because that's more impressive in that era than it is with LeBron James doing it now. One thing that got me thinking too was just last year when the Warriors won. The Warriors won the championship a year ago. Did you feel like, and you can comment, did you feel like they beat any team that just blew you away? Did you feel like, oh my gosh, the only team from the East I felt would have been a challenge was the defending champs with Giannis. And I could have swore he was injured in one of the rounds where they lost. He missed multiple games. That was it. Everyone else in the East, the Atlanta Hawks, whoever went, the Raptors, any of those teams, they were no real threat. They just didn't feel like it. And the Warriors won. You got Steph Curry. They have Klay Thompson. They have a kind of like, I think that might have been their last hurrah. It was great that they won. And you don't want to, and you don't take anything away from it. They won it. It's not their fault. They're in there. That's why I don't like to compare eras, because this era is nowhere near what Jordan went through in the 90s. And that's what I want to get to the point with James. Here, I'm 10 minutes in, but I've already told you how I've changed my perspective on Jordan just by doing research on the past, and not numbers, not looking at the best teams, but looking at it going, while I'm looking at those Pistons and Celtics and Hawks and 76ers teams and going, man, Jordan had to get, LeBron James has never had to go through anything like that. And the one mistake I think James has made is I didn't fault him for doing it, and I still don't, when the Celtics built that big three and he lost to them. And he said, you know what? I'm not going to stay here in Cleveland, be held captive by my owner to where I say, let me sign this max deal, and everyone pats me on the back, I stay in Cleveland, and now I'm handcuffed. Now all of a sudden if the owner says, you know what? You're going to get a few more Mo Williams or a few other guys where you're like, they're not bad. They're NBA players. They're not bad, but they're not Scottie Pippen. They're not Isaiah Thomas. They're not, a Kyrie Irving, who they wouldn't have been drafted there if James had stayed. They're not, a real Scottie Pippen type guy. So once he doesn't, so he's like, he made the decision best for him and he left. But by doing so and building these teams, he did not get forged like Michael Jordan did. Right? He took a beating. He had for several seasons. Maybe he made the one run in 07, but he had seasons where, he just couldn't get it done. His team wasn't good enough, but he didn't have it where he had to be pounded out and lost to the Celtics, and then lost to the Celtics the next year. And he had to say, what do I have to do to get better? And he digs down deep inside and becomes that guy. Yes, LeBron James is, my opinion, the best player of his era. In the last probably 15 years in that span, take a few here and there, not his first year as a rookie, not the last few as he's gotten older, but in his core prime years, he is the best player in his era. You can debate that if you want to say KD, I don't think so. My opinion, James is the best. But I don't think he like anyone else nowadays, unless it gets back to that stage, which I think it's flown the coop, you're never going to see a guy or a group like the Detroit Pistons, like the Boston Celtics, because even when the Warriors won, they weren't really battle tested. The Clippers, that one little rivalry for a season and a half, 2 seasons, and then it's over. So with all the player movement, I don't think we'll ever see anyone. So that's why I come to say, I still don't like to say GOAT because of the different eras Jordan did. But I do say Jordan's 72 win team is probably, I'm going to say it, in my opinion, the greatest team ever. And if I had to say, if you said, hey, right now, who is the best player in the history of the NBA? You don't want to go too far back, even though it could be Oscar Robertson, Bill Russell, somebody like that, Wilt Chamberlain. Smaller league, less teams. The whole world of NBA where the kids grow up now was not developed. Look at the guys, how they are now. The talent is so insane, but there's so many leagues. So to me, it's hard to say that. But if I did, I would have to debate between Jordan and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, both from college, probably high school, and pros. Those guys are right there, side by side. So they both got a lot of similar things, all-stars, all-pros, defensive, so that's the one you'd want to go through. But once again, before you comment on this video, I never said James was the GOAT. He was just a player that I've liked. He can do anything. I love the fact you can put him in any position. And some people have said that doesn't mean anything. I disagree with that. That does mean something. That I can't slap Jordan in the center position. No, you can't make up for what Jordan is. And there's no shame in saying James doesn't have that. Neither does 99% of probably the history of the NBA. It's very tiny, which makes him and the other small group a very select group. But it does matter if I can slap James at point guard and there's a mismatch. I can put him at center or power forward and there's a mismatch. There's so many things that James makes him great. He's just not going to be Michael Jordan. So that is it on this video. I hope you like it. I hope you stayed, comment, subscribe. I'm going to keep doing other things. This is a fantasy football channel, but I always said it's a sports channel first. There will be more fantasy. There will be more sports stories. There will be more debates. to live on as we got so many other things going on. Give a like, give a subscribe, and look for more stuff coming up. Talk to you guys later. Peace.